when William, the newly appointed police chief, found himself handcuffed by his own officers in front of a gathering crowd. He chose not to resist. The stark reality of racial bias and hatred laid bare before him, unmistakable and raw. Yet instead of seeking retribution, William resolved to transform the system from within, compelling each officer to confront the uncomfortable truths they had long ignored. What unfolded next would astonish even those hardened by brutality. But let's rewind to the beginning. Recently appointed as head of the police department, William decided to explore his new neighborhood incognito. He wanted to immerse himself in the community, grasp local concerns, and determine how to effectively lead his precinct. The warm day and tranquil streets invited introspection, allowing William to absorb the surroundings: dilapidated homes, cracked sidewalks, and children playing. He understood the importance of connecting with the environment for which he was now responsible. As William passed a parked patrol car, an officer, Kevin, young and inexperienced, emerged with a mix of confidence and anxiety. "Hey you," Kevin called out. "Can you stop for a second?" Sensing the tension, William turned calmly. "Good afternoon. Is there a problem?" "Let me see your ID," Kevin ordered, his tone accusatory, as if he had already decided William was a suspect. "I'm just walking," William replied, handing over his identification. "I'm new here, just getting acquainted with the neighborhood." Kevin, entrenched in suspicion, disregarded William's explanation. "Hands on the hood," he commanded, reaching for his handcuffs. William's heart raced, but he knew staying calm was crucial. Time seemed to stretch as tension mounted, yet he complied, believing his identity would soon be revealed. As Kevin moved closer, William felt the humiliation rise within him. "I haven't stolen anything," he stated, surprised by the accusation. Ignoring William's protests, Kevin continued his intrusive search, now fully convinced he was dealing with a criminal. "Tell it to the judge," he snapped as onlookers began to gather, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. In that moment, William felt stripped of his authority, just another black man unjustly accused. Soon, a higher-ranking officer arrived, quickly siding with Kevin. To them, William was merely a typical suspect. "We're taking you in," the senior officer stated, dismissively, neglecting to verify who William truly was. "Please, I can explain," William urged, but his words fell on deaf ears. The cold click of handcuffs fastened around his wrists, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some expressed sympathy. Others appeared bewildered, phones raised to capture the moment. "I have the right to make a phone call," William asserted firmly, fighting to maintain his composure. The officers exchanged uneasy glances and reluctantly permitted him to call. Gripping the phone with one hand, he took a deep breath and dialed his deputy's number. "William here. I need you at Lake and Pine immediately. I've been detained by my own officers," he stated, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. His deputy, shocked by the situation, didn't waste time with questions. He understood immediate action was necessary. Moments later, the deputy's patrol car screeched to a halt. He jumped out, disbelief etched on his face as he took in the scene. His boss, the newly appointed chief of police, stood handcuffed, flanked by two officers who were clearly in over their heads. "What the hell?" the deputy whispered, astonished. He hurried toward the officers, outrage flashing in his eyes. "Take those cuffs off him now," he ordered, focusing on Kevin, who was beginning to grasp the magnitude of his blunder. Both officers froze, pale and anxious, aware they had crossed an unforgivable line. "You've just arrested the chief of police," the deputy continued, his glare piercing. Kevin's hands shook as he hurriedly removed the cuffs. The weight of their actions settled heavily in the air. They hadn't just apprehended a random passerby. They had handcuffed their new leader. To everyone's surprise, once freed, William didn't explode with anger. Instead, he calmly rubbed his wrists, avoiding any sudden movements. "I think we need to have a serious conversation," he said, his voice steady and calm, but underscored by an unmistakable gravity. "Let's discuss how we arrived at this moment." The following day, William convened an emergency meeting with all officers from his precinct. He recognized that what transpired wasn't solely the fault of a few individuals, but stemmed from systemic issues that permeated their approach to policing. His role as chief wasn't to mete out punishment, but to inspire a transformation in mindset and practice throughout the department. The officers gathered in the conference room, tension thick in the air. Everyone was aware of the previous day's events, but the atmosphere was charged with uncertainty about William's next steps. Many feared that Kevin would face severe repercussions, potentially even termination. William began the meeting by reminding his team why they chose to serve as police officers, to protect and serve their community. His tone was firm, yet devoid of hostility. Rather than casting blame, he highlighted the larger issue of systemic bias and its potential for harm if left unaddressed. Yesterday's incident wasn't merely an error of judgment by one officer, William said, addressing the room. It's a symptom of deep-rooted biases that exist within our system. We must recognize how these biases shape our perceptions of the community we serve. He locked eyes with Kevin, who sat in the front row, visibly tense. You acted on instinct and stereotypes rather than taking a moment to pause and reflect, William continued. But this isn't just about you. It's a systemic problem that affects us all. It's our duty to confront it and change our actions. The room fell silent, everyone hanging on William's words. He emphasized how incidents like theirs eroded public trust in law enforcement, underscoring that officers must embody justice, not perpetuate prejudice. He spoke about the necessity of training, self-reflection, and the courage to acknowledge one's mistakes. Every time we act on biased assumptions, we not only violate an individual's rights, but also jeopardize the trust our community places in us, William said, looking around the room. Without trust, our community cannot function properly. We must be models of justice and equality, upholding the law while protecting everyone's rights. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that this incident had become a pivotal lesson for the entire precinct. The officers began to understand that the issue of bias was not an isolated event, but part of a pervasive problem requiring active engagement. William didn't directly punish Kevin, but he made sure everyone recognized the serious consequences of their actions. This meeting marked a turning point for the entire department, as officers began to adopt a fresh perspective on their responsibilities, committing themselves to confront their internal biases and better serve their community.